Alright, this is a Harley-Davidson Lowrider FXR model, 1991. What we're dealing with today is a hole in the gas tank. I think. It started leaking right here. Let's see if we can get a good shot of that. So the fuel gauge wires come out of the tank at the bottom, and gas was just barely dripping out of there. So the question is the fuel gauge mechanism leaking itself? Is there some kind of gasket under here, or has it rusted through and I've got to put a sealer on it? So we're going to find out. Alright, the cap has a little sign on it right here that says "Do not twist." Not a fuel cap. Now, how do you suppose you get that off? Let's twist it and find out. It just pulls straight up, so it's a pressure fit into the tank. And there are a bunch of wires connected to nuts that I have to release to get it out. And some screws. Let's see if I can get a good shot in there. Under the fuel gauge, you can see there's a couple of wires that need to be released from the bottom or from the bottom of the fuel gauge itself to get it out of there. Now I'm going to take a picture of them before I do it so that I know where to put them back in. Alright, with the gauge removed, it's time for a little detective work. Now if we look, these wires here go through that hole in the bottom there, out the bottom of the tank. Now it looks to me like there's some crud on this screw and down here in this hole, and you don't see the crud over here or over here or over here. So that could indicate that the gasket beneath this sender unit, there's a gasket, has a tiny leak. The gas comes up, goes into this hole, which you can see is a little bit rusty, and then drips out the bottom of the tank. Just a very slow drip, but annoying nonetheless. So I'm going to take this bit of corrosion on the screw here to indicate that that's what's been happening. We'll try a new gasket and we'll see if it still leaks. Alright, so when we pull it out, this is the suspect gasket here. There's a float down there at the bottom, and I can't quite figure out how to get the float out of the hole. Alright, this is what the entire sender unit looks like. You can see how long this is. That means it's only going to come out if you twist it and pull it up, and it just barely fits out of the hole. I had to twist it around for 10 minutes to find the right angle. But to come out of the little hole, it's got to be straight up and down. So it's got to come straight up out of the hole, or it doesn't fit. You can see how small that hole is right there relative to this big thing. So it only comes out one way, and it's really tight fit. Alright, so now if we look down in the hole, that's the tube that the wires go through. So I think what I'm going to do is replace this top gasket, see if it leaks when I fill it up with gas, and if it does, then I'll do the tank coating. But the Harley factory coating from 1991 looks pretty good still. Alright, so now that it's time to go parts shopping, I'm going to plug this hole so mice and dust and ants don't get into my gas tank and it stays clean. And once that's all sealed up, we get on the old reliable bike that always starts, and we ride down to the Harley shop and pick up a new gasket. Alright, I took this gasket down to my local Harley shop to get a new one, and they looked at it and they said there's nothing wrong with it. And they suggested I just put a little bit of grease on both sides of it, put it back in, and tighten the screws real tight, and it should stop the leak. Now when I took the screws out, some of them were just about finger tight. I mean, they were super loose, so I'm sure that's what the problem was. But we're about to find out if that's true once we get it back together. Alright, getting this ready to go back in. I think I bent this a little bit, so I'm going to bend it a little bit to level it out, back out. And then stick it back in the tank with fresh grease on the gasket. Alright, here we go. Now the groove is going to go towards the back of the bike. We put the gasket over this part early, rather than trying to stuff that big thing through the gasket. I just used a little teeny bit of grease. And here we go. And the hole. Spin it around. It took me a while to figure out how to get that in, so I turned the camera off, but basically you stick it in with the black thing pointing forwards and then just sort of twist it down, and if you try to get it in any other way, it'll hang up on something or other in there, because there's a tube going down in the middle and there's very limited clearance around here. So you just put the black thing towards the front of the bike, the black float, and twist it down in there and then screw it down. Alright, I'm tightening up the screws. There's 5 of them, so it's not completely symmetrical, but I go one across from the other and just progressively tighten them down until they're super good and tight. When I initially took them out, a lot of them felt finger tight, which means that was probably how the fuel was getting out. And only after I filled the bike up. When the bike was lower on fuel, the fuel level was low enough so that it wouldn't leak into here. And when it did leak into here, it went out the only way it could go, which was down the hole. The bike also stunk like gas for months and months before it started dripping. So I think there was just a little bit of a leak coming out, enough to cause a smell, but not enough to be a drop. Alright, now it's time to connect all of these nuts to all of those wires. The way I do it is I take a picture with my camera, my digital camera, before I took it apart, and I can see where all the wires go. And then I use a little teeny tiny ignition wrench like this to connect the wires. It seems to work better than pliers or anything else, to have just little tiny baby wrenches to work with. And in case you didn't take a picture, here's what we've got. It's a fuel gauge. Flip it around. Left side there's a red wire, in the middle there's 2 black wires, and on the right here there's an orange wire. So you just torque them down and cross your fingers, fill it up with gas, and see if we have a leak. And the little washers that are on there, come on, focus. The little washers, little spiky washer, goes above the connector. So it goes connector, spiky washer, and then nut on top of that. Alright, reattaching the fuel cap, we make sure that none of the wires are pinched. And just push it back down into place. Pop. Simple. Now, the moment of truth, we'll test drive it and see what we get after I fill it up with gas. I probably don't even have to drive it. Fill it up with gas and see if I get a puddle. Alright, it's back together. Gas tank is full. We go down here to the former hole. Where is it? Right there. And you can see it's completely dry. So we have mission accomplished. It was just a gasket, so I don't have to buy a new gas tank. I don't have to seal it with paint. I just get on and ride and everything's good.